I'd say, if you are a patriot and you want to be part of a grateful nation, when you are going to meet that veteran and invite him into your home, have a place to point them to.
What do you guys make of our alliances and the way they've really sort of shifted over the last 5 years, let's say, and just what's going on with NATO and the United Nations? I mean, Trump has basically obliterated the United Nations. NATO is shifting, and that more than that, that if we don't do anything, nobody does anything. Mm-hmm. And that is the sort of bargain that the United States in that's very difficult. Do you think that's a fair thing to say? If we don't do anything internationally, no one does anything. Well,
NATO sure isn't. I mean, the UN has proven to be, I think, exposed at this point as their willingness, and so America has had to step up and fill the gap. But I think also the president has kind of exposed that everyone needs to come to the table and contribute, and he's really called them out at the UN summit. I think it was the UN summit where he really exposed them on this. And so, but I do believe that America does have a responsibility to fill the gap. I don't believe we're in nation building and handle every problem, to be a firefighters for every fire in the world. But I do believe we have a responsibility as the strongest nation in the world.
Yeah. Why don't other countries step up? It doesn't seem like anyone steps up anymore. Like they all say they like to hate us, and then they ask us for help, and then sometimes we overstep the line, and now it gets worse. I mean, there's this crazy bargain always happening.
Because we've been that security blanket for them for so long. My first tour of duty was over in Europe, and I was part of a NATO unit. And when you looked at the other airborne units who were part of that NATO unit, you just kind of scratch your head. Like, dudes, what are y'all doing? Do y'all even train? I mean, you can't hit the broadside of a barn. But these collective body politics, United Nations, European Union, I think they're being rejected. And now when you look at these security organizations like NATO, President Trump has gone in and said, hey guys, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. When he called out Angela Merkel for having a deal with Russia for natural gas, and now you're asking me to protect you from Russia, but yet you're doing economic deals with Russia, come on. Does that make sense? And furthermore, you're not owning up to your 2% responsibility of financing in NATO. I will tell you, when I was in Afghanistan, the biggest problem for the German army was obesity, because they were just sitting around, they were eating Brötchen, good sausage and bread and everything. They weren't getting out. They weren't fighting anyone. In southern Afghanistan, we had the Brits, we had the Canadians, we had the Romanians, and we had the Dutch. And they each had a separate province. And each of them had their own rules of engagement or, orders from the Ministry of Defense. They didn't coordinate within each other. And so the Taliban just easily understood, well, we can do this in this province because the Dutch are not going to drop bombs on us. They're just going to fly over our heads and, be real loud.
So at that point, NATO doesn't have a standard operating procedure? If you're all doing something together in one country?
Based upon their respective ministries of defense. Everyone knew that the Romanians, the orders for the Romanians, they could not leave the roads. They could not get out of their vehicles.
Wow.
So, I mean, how are you going to win against an enemy when you have your Ministry of Defense dictating all of these different,
Is that changing under NATO now?
Well, I haven't been back to Afghanistan since 2008 or 7, so I wouldn't know. But I think that, maybe when you look at the Georgians for going out and doing patrols, maybe it is different. But these major NATO member countries, they're not stepping up. And I would even begin to question why we have Turkey in NATO, because Erdogan is not a friend to Western civilization.
Yeah. But the other countries are stepping up because of what you said. I mean, as the U.S. comes back and moves to that support and advisory capacity, then they have to do their part. I mean, this is a strong presidential administration saying that, hey, you guys are going to do your role. We're not going to go out there and do all these send our American warriors to do all these combat patrols while you sit back on the base. This is the strategy and the shift of the military and the administration. Yeah. And you see a big surge in the special operations community and that support and advisory role too.
So let's shift to veterans, because I think that's what brings you guys really together. I think. How did you guys meet, by the way? Was it through the nonprofit? How did you meet?
How did we meet?
Was it?
Heck, I don't know. I don't know. I think you needed some Army friends, and you just kind of called me up. No,
we were in the same circles of people, and we have mutual friends, and we both have obviously we're both patriots and love our warriors, and outside of uniform, we're both still serving, and we're kindred hearts to do this mission.
Yeah. So you started Mighty Oaks.
I did.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? And Colonel West sits on the board.
Yeah, maybe it's hard to really tell you without sharing a little bit of my story. After my 8th deployment to Afghanistan, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. To give you kind of how that started, for me, it started with, just coming home and being frustrated, angry. I have a wife and I've been married for 24 years and 3 amazing children, and they really endured me coming home and just being a tyrant to them. Lots of verbal abuse and never physical abuse, but throwing things, breaking things, just acting like a lunatic around my house.
Yeah. Did you know something was wrong with you, or were you even aware of it enough?
I was. I tell you, when the first, that anger intensity worked really well in Afghanistan. Like I said, the Afghans that I worked with, they hated the Taliban. The task force I was on had a Viking kind of war culture mindset, and so it worked really well in Afghanistan. But 24 hours later, when I'd be home, wife and children, it didn't work well there. I couldn't flip a switch and turn it off. So I recognized that, but it was a moment that I came home from Afghanistan. I made it home for my daughter's birthday. She was so excited I was going to be there, and I remember she's very opinionated. She still is, and she didn't like the icing on her cake. And just saying that, I flipped out and I grabbed my little girl's birthday cake and picked it up and threw it against the wall and destroyed my little girl's birthday. And I remember in that moment thinking, what kind of dad does something like that? And that was one example. But at that moment, I realized I had to just back off. Instead of fixing the behavior, I just kind of distanced myself. And so between these 8 deployments, I would just stay busy at schools and training and workups, and just stayed busy and isolated myself from them. And over time, that anger started turning into anxiety. I started having these physiological symptoms. My arms would go numb. My face would go numb. I'd feel like my throat was swelling shut. Sometimes I feel like I had 1,000 pounds on my chest. And I started researching what this was, and learned it was panic attacks. But I didn't want to say anything to the guys I worked with in this little special operations group. I figured the guys would think I was weak. Maybe I'd lose my clearance. And so I didn't speak up. I tried to push it down and do my job, and eventually those symptoms got much worse. I actually started having these moments where it almost felt like a detached, out-of-body experience.
Wow.
And I'd wake up on these fogs and realize I didn't remember the last few weeks. And so I had to speak up and say something, because I wasn't only putting myself in danger, but I was putting other people in danger as well. And so that's when I was brought home, and I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that wasn't my rock bottom, but that began a very downward spiral in my life. My wife and my psychologist were trying to help me move forward, and I was in such a state of, the only way I really know how to describe the state of panic that I was in, I just recently kind of came up with words for it. It's like if you were, ankle was handcuffed to the bottom of a pool drain, and you had the surface was about a foot above your head, and you had just how desperate you would be for one breath of air, but you never drown, you never die. That's how I was 24/7. And on top of that panic, I felt totally ashamed, because I was so proud of the job I was doing, and my whole identity was wrapped in that job, and now it's gone. And so my wife and my counselor were trying to find something for me to do, and that's where the MMA and jiu-jitsu came in. I'd say I did it since I was little, but I'm still little.
Yeah.
I did it since I was 5 years old. And,
wow.
And so I was already a professional fighter, so I dove into that and just invested my time in that, and I had a great deal of success. I ended up being 18-2 as a pro fighter. I won a world title belt from Legacy FC, and fought in Strike Force and all these shows. But really what I did was I never got well. I found something to hide in, like somebody would climb in a bottle of alcohol or drugs. For me, that's where I just made myself occupied. And so eventually...
Do you think that's where most people are at when they start getting into MMA? Because as you know, obviously, it's absolutely blowing up, and Joe Rogan's talking to all the fighters all the time, and there really seems to be this thing about getting your shit together, that seems to be the beginning point.
What's a disciplined lifestyle? You have to be disciplined, everything around... I mean, I'm competing. I was telling Alan West today, he's like, you still compete? I compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments. I'm doing the world championships in August, and the reason why is because it helps me regiment my life. It's something, I put a date on the calendar, and everything in my life becomes disciplined. The way my family life is, the way I eat, the way I sleep, it brings some, the way I manage my schedule for traveling and speaking, everything becomes regimented. So I try to compete twice a year for that. But when you live in the lifestyle of a professional fighter and competing at that very high level like I competed at, it really helped me manage my life. And my life was, I was still dealing with panic attacks. I was still angry. I was still, my life was still kind of in disarray. And my marriage really began to deteriorate because I wasn't addressing the problem. And so eventually I ended up in an affair. I didn't care. Me and my wife, I was so callous at that point. And so we sat our kids down and said we were getting divorced. In fact, my wife filed for divorce. We sold our home, moved in 2 separate apartments, signed 12-month leases. And my wife and I had 2 very different reactions. And my wife went into a church, and I don't mean on a Sunday. She went every day, got connected with a group of people. And she said she started praying for me. And at that time, I was probably as far away from God as you could possibly be. But I asked her now, of course, what was she praying for me at this time? And she just prayed, God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad. Let me love Chad the way you love Chad. Let me forgive Chad the way you forgave Chad. And so you have this woman that's like fighting for me. And meanwhile, I'm in this apartment, immediately like I'm separated from this woman I don't have to deal with anymore. I don't have to be responsible for the problems I was causing anymore. And so I had a big fight on Showtime, Strike Force. And that's what I was focused on. And when that fight was over, I ended up winning that fight. But as I won that fight in the Toyota Center, there was like 10,000 people there. And I remember thinking when my hand was raised, like my wife wasn't there. And she'd always been my cheerleader before. And something about that, I went back to my apartment that night and I started thinking about all the problems I caused, the people I hurt, and my family mainly. And I thought, well, I blamed everyone else before, like I was the common denominator, like the problem was me. And when I came to this thought, this idea came over me that somehow my family would be sad without me, but they would be better off. Now, if you know anything about the veteran suicide rate, that same hopeless thought finds a home in the hearts of 20 plus veterans every day. That not, I'm gonna kill myself to escape my pain, but somehow you think that people around me be sad, my family would be sad, my friends would be sad, but they're gonna be better off. And so that decision really seemed like it made sense to me, and I made a decision to take my life. In that apartment, I had all my family pictures. I'm ashamed to say, but it's true. I had all my family pictures in my closet because girls coming over and whatnot. And so I would sit in my closet with I'd shut the door. I'd put my family pictures on the floor, and I'd try to build up the courage. I'd put the pistol I had a Glock 22 pistol. I'd put it to my head. I'd put it in my mouth, trying to build up the courage. And I don't know to this day if I had the courage to actually pull that trigger because I didn't. But what did keep me from doing it was my son Hunter, the one that's in Afghanistan right now. He had the only key to my apartment, and I knew he'd be the one to either find me or open the door for someone to find me, and that kept me from actually doing it. And one morning I called my wife. She says I was frantic. I don't really remember the call, but she came to my apartment, and when she came, I was actually in the closet with that pistol, and she knocked on my door and unwittingly, intervened and saved my life. I remember hiding that pistol under my blanket because I didn't want her to find it, and I answered the door, and we got in this confrontation, and she asked me a question that radically changed my life. She asked me how I could do everything I did in the Marine Corps. She saw me become a Recon Marine, saw me train for these deployments and all these things in Afghanistan and train for MMA fights, cutting weight, and all the discipline it takes to do that. She's like, how could you do all of that, and when it comes to your family, you'll quit? And that question for me, to be called a quitter, which is one of the most soul-cutting words to me, it just impacted me, and I knew I had to make a change.
So, wow, all right, there's a lot there. So, well, first off, thank you for being so upfront about the personal stuff, because I know that's not easy for anybody. So before we get to Mighty Oaks then, I'm sure you have heard many, many stories that are like that. Did you ever experience anything along those lines? Did you ever go down that path personally?
No, me personally, it was just different for me. I have a very supportive wife who, her dad was career military also, did 24 years in the Army, in Vietnam, 2 tours, and he's buried at Arlington National Cemetery. So we always tried to have that very strong support. And as a battalion commander, I remember before we went to Iraq, I tried to tell the soldiers that the person that you are here, when you put that first step on those stairs to go into that airplane, you gotta leave that person here. And the person that you are over there, somehow you've got to leave that person over there. And I think that that's what the struggle is for our warriors, to be able to make that switch. It's not saying that you're cold and callous to be able to do it, but you just understand what's required of you. Your nation is calling you to be a certain person, but your family is also calling you to be a certain person. And that's what veterans and that's what our military men and women are struggling with, because we put them in these very intense combat situations, and then we extricate them from them and we put them back into the family. And I don't think we do a really good job of the decompression time over there before they come back home. I think that you need a good 2 to 3 weeks before, as you're coming out of those combat zones of operation, before you come home. And it's important that they talk to each other. We don't allow that to happen.
Do we do none of that? I mean, traveling across the world takes some time, but you mean some like real time at a facility somewhere?
Over there, and instead of rushing, we got to get them back home. We got to get all the equipment loaded up and get them back home. Take the time, a couple of weeks. to just let guys sit around and talk and get that opportunity to leave that person over there and start mentally preparing themselves to go back, because a lot has changed in your families. You've been gone, you know, your wife, your kids, they've continued on with their lives. You're kind of the one that's coming back in, and you're kind of the guest. And you've got to, reaccustom yourself.
It's got to be a huge catch-22 though, because in their minds, they're all going, I want to get home tomorrow.
Yes.
Get me home.
Yeah, but I think that in the long run, it would be so beneficial. You know, I remember I did a year in Korea in 1995, and my daughter, my oldest daughter, when I left, I think she was a little over a year. And, you know, that was the day before Skype and everything like that. And so you're sharing VHS tapes and what have you. But when I got back from Korea, you know, she was there and she looked at me and she was like, I think I know who you are, but I'm not really sure who you are. And so it was all about redeveloping that relationship. You know, taking her out, you know, daddy-daughter time, just whatever. And then finally she realized, okay, this is a guy I've been seeing, you know, on those videotapes, and yeah, he's my dad. He's not leaving. He's not going anywhere. So I think it's important that we allow our guys to have that time, but we are putting them in such a constant deployment cycle. And that's why I get so upset about how we have reduced the strength of our military, because we're running these warriors, we're running their families into the ground. And that's why Mighty Oaks is so important.
Yeah, so you handed me the segue. Talk to me about why you started Mighty Oaks.
Well, in that reaction to my wife's question, you know, why would I not fight for my family and my own life? I had to respond to that, and through that response, I found the solution that many of our warriors face, not just me. I knew I couldn't make those changes by myself. I knew I needed help, and so I asked my wife, was there someone at this church she was going to, because I knew I couldn't do it with the people around me as well. I had some great friends, but there were more people that were telling me what I wanted to hear, not what I needed to hear. And so I met a man named Steve Toth, and Steve is a Texas state legislator now. And at the time, he was the elder at the church my wife was going to, and a small business owner. And we met at a Starbucks coffee shop, and I had the perfect plan of how I was going to fix my life. I was probably slid it over to him really smug, and he put his hand on it, slid it right back over to me, and he told me I was going to fail. And I remember being like initially really offended, because I'm like, this is pretty good. And really what I was trying to do was manipulate him to say, take this plan, show it to my wife, because I'm trying to fix things. And he tapped on that paper and he said, if this thing doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God, I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm not going to let you waste mine. And I know a lot of people may not agree with my faith or what I believe, but I'll tell you this: I had tried everything. I'd been through all the counseling, all the programs. I'd been on the pills. I had tried professional success. I had been successful financially and in my career as an athlete, and as an instructor. I had 1,000 students in my school that I was teaching, and so I tried all those things, and nothing had worked. And so it was time for me to try something different. We have a saying at Mighty Oaks: if what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? And so I trusted this man, Steve. I surrendered my life to God through his leadership and his mentorship, and things in my life started to radically change. I found a restoration, hope. For the first time I had hope in a very long time. And I found ultimately what I've been searching for the whole time, my whole life, and that's purpose. And that purpose was to share what I discovered with other people. And that was how Mighty Oaks began. Through that process, I learned something really important. And it sounds so simple, but to me it was so profound, that all these things that had happened to me, my childhood, Afghanistan, losing one of my best friends, Foster Harrington, we served together for 10 years when he was killed on our first deployments. All these things that had happened to me didn't lead me to be in that closet with my pistol in my hand. What led me there were the choices I made in response to those things. And I still had control of that. I still had the control of the ability to choose differently, and as cliche as it may sound, I didn't have to let my past define my future. I could choose a different future moving forward. And in doing that, part of that future I chose moving forward was to take what I discovered and share it with others. It was like if I was dying of cancer and this guy Steve gave me the cure, I had to share it. I felt obligated to share it. And so that's how we started Mighty Oaks. We weren't ready at the time. My wife and I were still bleeding as a family, trying to heal, but we both felt passionate to do this mission. And I'm so thankful we did. I mean, to date, I've spoken to over 100,000 active duty troops at bases around the world by request to share a message on resiliency. I go to Marine Corps boot camp. The Marine Corps allows me to speak at Marine Corps boot camp to these young warriors about resiliency and spiritual resiliency. And we run a program called a Legacy Program. It's our recovery program. We have 4 ranches in California, Ohio, Virginia, and Texas, and we pay for everything, travel, flights, all the program is totally free. Active duty veterans and spouses come to these programs. We do 30 camps per year, and we've had 2,600 graduates from those camps. And so it's been absolutely incredible to take the lessons I've learned and realize that I wasn't the only one. I wasn't alone. 22 veterans every day were taking their lives at the same time I was going through this. Divorce rates in some bases are up to 80% for combat veterans. Like a lot of people having the same issues I had. I had the solution. And now we have this most amazing team. People like Colonel West on a board, and General Boykin, and we have Sergeant Major Marine Corps, Sergeant Major Kent, who's a great friend of both of ours. Outshot us both.
About one shot.
About one shot. But yeah, we just have the most amazing team and staff to serve these warriors. We have I think 14 full-time staff members and about 40 instructors that are all combat veterans that serve as instructors at these programs. Yeah. This is absolutely incredible.
There's so much there. So it's really interesting to me that you said you tried everything else and faith is what worked for you. Now, yes. I assume that as a man of faith, you hear something like that, that doesn't surprise you.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And I think that, in the Bible, it says that you can do all things through Christ Jesus who strengthens you. And that's the message we need to get out there. You and I were talking earlier about, the victim mentality. And I always tell people, you got two choices in life. You either be a victim or you be a victor. And that's why I hate progressive socialism, because it tells people they're going to be victims. And that's not what America's about. And even more so, Dave, when you look at what is happening with our young people in the United States of America right now, the suicide rate, it's because they're searching for something. And they're out there trying everything. They're on the internet, they're on the social media, they're playing the video games, they want to be cool, the drugs and everything that the world says that you can have to make you accept it. But there's just one thing that can really fill that emptiness in your heart. And I think, we talked about an awakening in this country. I also see a faith awakening in this country as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. You guys probably know I've been on tour with Jordan Peterson for the last year and a half or so. And, he's not trying to sell religion on anyone particularly, but he is trying to show the power of religious stories and the meaning and all of the things that I think you're talking about. And I do see a rebirth of that. Yeah. And it's been, I've actually seen it all over the world because we traveled all over the world, and it's pretty fascinating to see firsthand because it's not what the media shows you. And he's moved me on this. You can't be around that for a year and a half and not be moved personally on that.
Well, that's one of the things, leftism is about secular humanism, because they don't want you to believe that you can have faith and hope in something other than the government. And when you look at what our founders created, when you look and read John Locke's second treatise on government, natural rights theory, your inalienable rights are not dictated to you by man. It comes from a creator. Life, liberty.
They can take them from you, but they didn't give them to you. They can take them from you,
but they didn't give them to you. And that's the thing that we have to come to understand. And that's why you see this drive to move, faith out of the mainstream in the United States of America, because they don't want people to understand that, I don't have to wait for you to give it to me. Okay, it's already been given to me. I have the ability to pursue my happiness. Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Spartacus, all you guys can't, you can't guarantee happiness for me. And I think that's what Chad is saying. He went to all of these other things to try to fill that hole in his life. And then Steve Toth told him that, here's the answer.
I got the Spartacus reference there. that didn't get by me. That didn't get by me.
And you see, there's hope on this, because those people that are coming to us, half of those people in active duty military orders being sent from the military, they don't agree with the fact that we're a faith-based program, but they're looking for solutions. 15 years ago, the DOD and VA began just pushing clinical programs. We have 1,100 VA and DOD clinical programs. At the time, the suicide rate was 16 a day. It's only gotten worse. And so the military, the VA, the veteran community are looking for answers. And faith-based programs like Mighty Oaks have proven to be successful. We just finished a 3-year longitudinal data, a doctoral study, and I could bore you with the numbers from it, but we did outperform clinical trials in this independent study.
I assume there are some secular organizations that are doing very similar things that probably have decent success rates too. Sure. You're just saying that for you and for people that are like-minded that this works for you, but you don't have any inherent problem with people doing it from a more secular perspective.
I don't. I do believe that some of those things are going to be short-lived. When people go and are inspired or motivated, inspiration and motivation tend to fade. Faith in a God that created us tends to sustain, and it gives you the resiliency to bounce back. So I do believe that personally. But however, I've seen some other great programs out there. I just believe that when people make the decision to align their lives with the lives that we were created to live, they find true resiliency and true strength and real hope and real purpose moving forward. And we've seen that firsthand, and thousands of guys. And not everyone that comes to our program, or matter of fact, about half of the people that come to our program would say they share our faith when they come, but they're looking for something that they hadn't found anywhere else.
So this hour absolutely flew by. So if I was giving you guys each a closing statement here, how is it that you'd want that average person out there to get involved, help some of these wounded warriors, help you guys get the mission out there? I think we did a little of it here, but what would you want people to do?
I think it's the most important thing is just don't go up and say thank you for your service. Get to know a veteran. There are veterans. We should not have homeless and jobless veterans in the United States of America. And if you know a veteran that is out there alone, invite them into your home. Show them the real love, the love that they extended to you, that they were going to lay down their life for your freedom.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough to beat that one.
I'd say, if you are a patriot and you want to be part of a grateful nation, when you are going to meet that veteran and invite them into your home, have a place to point them to. And there's plenty of places out there. Mighty Oaks Foundation is a place that they can point people to as a resource to help our warriors that are struggling with suicide, divorce, PTSD, all those issues. And we're not only a resource, but a free one. We cover all the costs to that. So free tool at your disposal as a grateful nation to serve our warriors. Any warriors listening, our spouses, just visit our website, and again, we'll take care of you.
And the website is mightyoaksprograms.org.
That's right. Yep.
All right. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
Mine.
Thank you so much.
Dave.
And I should tell you, considering 5 years ago, I thought you were a complete nutbag. I don't know. I don't know if this says now more about you or more about me.
Well, you know what? That's the thing. You have to stand strong, and eventually light will overcome.
Now you ended the show twice on a solid note. Thanks for watching, everybody.